right, so we're going to jump right into questions and flow into our lecture, which is the exact opposite of what I usually do. All right, our first question is about spitting. So this is a 4-year-old, and he started to enjoy playing with saliva. All right, so overall, it looks like he plays really well on his own, but then will suddenly turn toward mom, call her by her name, and then when she faces him, he'll spray saliva all over her face and start laughing. And so the parent thinks that, oh, as a child with autistic tendencies, he generally has a difficult time interacting with others. So, maybe this is a good development in terms of him wanting to interact. Now, since it's a joke with bad taste, what dad does is he'll spray spit right back at his face because the child doesn't like getting anything on his face. So if the parent responds like that, then the child will stop spitting for a period of time. And the parent has a question like, is this the right thing for me to do? Now, if my child were a normally developing child, I would absolutely discipline against this behavior. But how would we handle this situation? All right, now, the first thing is, as therapists, we can't do that kind of thing, right? Like, we just can't. That's just, one parent seeing a therapist do that to their child would be okay with that. So that's the first thing is, in treatment, we probably couldn't do that thing. However, as a parent, you have wide discretion in terms of how you discipline your child. Now, for me, the consequence that you're using seems to work because it's actually decreasing the behavior when you actually implement it. Then you have to make sure you're implementing it consistently, that every single time the child does it, you implement that consequence so that they learn not to engage in that particular behavior. Now, the question of like, well, because this child has a diagnosis of autism and whatnot, should I treat them differently? And my question always to that is no. So what you're always looking to do, when you're a parent is get rid of any bad behaviors your kids demonstrate, and the thing is that you want to be consistent with it. You got to implement something that's going to be meaningful to the child, which means that from one child to another, you have very, very different tendencies. Now, if I tried to discipline them the exact same way, there's a good likelihood for both my kids that it'll work for one, but it won't work for the other. Why? Because they're very, very different kids. So the thing is that when you're talking about disciplining kids, it's about teaching them that there are consequences for their actions and that those consequences have to be meaningful to them in order for them to change their behaviors. Because if your child just doesn't care about the consequence, it's not going to have its intended effect. Now, one thing that everyone should understand, okay, is that autism is a kind of made up diagnosis, right? It's a classification system, right? It's not actually real, it's not like, I have sickle cell anemia, or I have this other thing. And, a blood test will show me, I either have it or I don't, okay? Autism is a diagnostic label that we apply to kids that share a certain number of symptomology. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this classification system because it helps clinicians identify, these are the common set of symptoms and a common set of challenges that are associated with working with this particular population. The problem typically arises is when you start to believe in this autism diagnosis, making it a more real thing rather than, this is a diagnostic category. This is a real thing. My child is autistic, okay? And the problem with that line of thinking is that you start to do things in everyday life where you forgive the child for doing something's wrong. Why? Because they're autistic, you know, and behaviors that you would not otherwise accept are accepted because why? They're autistic. Okay. And that line of thinking and that line of behaviors makes your child more autistic. So, my message to everyone is you get the diagnosis, it helps you identify the services you need, then forget about the diagnosis. Okay, you got to treat your child like a child. Every child has their own unique strengths and strengths and weaknesses. And what you want to do is like, oh, whenever you're looking at teaching your child skill sets, you have to work at the level of each individual child. When you're looking at getting rid of behaviors, what you're really looking at is, oh, how can I set up consequences that are meaningful for this child that's going to actually make a meaningful impact in changing their behaviors. All right, so hopefully that helps out. If I didn't answer your question thoroughly enough, make sure you comment, let me know if there's any other thing that I can talk about. I'm more than happy to talk.